This next video is a continuation of Dewey Hoffman's ePresentation and will include a description of the research report. In writing up my Phase 2 and Phase 3 projects, I really tried to consider how I can think of ways to constantly include our youth. I recognize how myself and others seek to find ways to reaffirm our identity in a way that's not linked to or determined by mainstream Western society. Through self-expression, various art forms, and putting their own spin on it, our young people are beginning to self-identify and recognize themselves as cultural practitioners and torchbearers for our traditional ways of life. I am also trying to update the perspective of our community to be more inclusive of contemporary ways of knowing and living. We can no longer live in an idyllic past where the great-grandmas who were not exposed to Western education or the great-grandpas who used handheld and non-motorized hunting and fishing technologies exclusively are considered traditionally pure, or what was somehow practiced in the past as somehow solely legitimate. Instead, I believe that as Indigenous peoples we always have and will continue to evolve with changing times, and will continue to incorporate newer and different tools and methodologies to serve our purposes. These are all based upon the larger goals of helping each other to survive and thrive in any number of conditions. I seek to connect the best experiences of my family and home community's history with the kind of values that I want to perpetuate for my own daughter and future descendants. This does require an ongoing filtering process to make sure that, based upon my own personal value system and beliefs, I'm focusing on specific goals and actions to live out this mission and vision. Through the research report process, I really tried to share some of my story and that of my family to describe and put into context what was the forms of education and passing down of knowledge and experience. A large part of that was documenting the way our language stopped at a certain point and how it's getting started again. This is not uncommon among Indigenous and Alaska Native communities. I wanted to try to find ways to show support, and in ways that I've received so much from traveling to the homelands of other Indigenous groups and benefited from their immense positive energy, enthusiasm, and sharing of resources. I wanted to see how I could do the same. There's no right way to reclaim your language and ceremonies. There's probably as many ways to do it as there are ways to cut a fish. And we all know everyone has their personal preference on how to do that. Another focus area is how our youth are shaping the language and really the next iteration of who we are as Indigenous peoples. In my case, as a younger Danaka learner and educator, I'm in the position to make decisions on how things are described. I find myself thinking of ways to come up with characteristic names of new technologies because we need to describe them. They're in our everyday surroundings, and in order to continue and be relevant, we need to make these considerations. As an educator, mentor, provider, and student, I intentionally seek to help individuals, especially our youth, hone in on their authentic selves and use those gifts and understandings to connect with solution-oriented efforts across Alaska and the world. I relate my own formal education with my lifelong goal of strengthening our Native community. My academic interests include fields related to Indigenous knowledge practices and decolonizing education in Alaska and the circumpolar North. I'm gaining the confidence to identify myself as an Indigenous scholar, being on the cusp of completing my Master's of Education after a 5-year pursuit. And although I'm in the culminating process for my degree requirements, I still feel like I have so much more to learn. I feel a need to challenge current academic paradigms that unfailingly seek to push out students like myself. I do feel the tension between the need to complete scholastic projects just quote-unquote to get the grade, and the larger need to challenge dominant modes of thinking while not rejecting everything without offering a viable solution. I'm trying to figure out how to make a meaningful contribution to the field while maintaining my own Kk'ołeyo ways of thinking and being. I chose to carve out space to conduct my graduate project, which is to create more written resources to directly support Indigenous second language learners. This is based upon direct feedback from community members and stakeholders and my own personal experiences. Overall, I hope to help others save time and access further resources. I went through a phase where I was really focused on policy solutions and pragmatic approaches. I had such short or limited patience for those who were in a place where they wanted to vent or really describe the problems. I'm always seeking and trying to figure out what can I do to help. What can I do to make a change or what hasn't been done already. Of course, as someone with less experience in this field, I'm going to encounter people who have more experience and who are going to say, I tried that already, it doesn't work, it's a waste of time, and yet I feel like I have a strength in my own background, professionally, through my education, and based upon who my family is and how we were raised. It's come with different levels of confidence as a student to think about how to confront these barriers and still make sure that I can maintain who I am as an Alaska Native man, as a father of a child, a young growing family. There are a lot of different pressures to conform and to maybe follow a certain way of life. And really what it comes down to is, am I doing everything I can to make sure that our language and culture continues? And if not, what changes do I need to make? So right now, we're focusing on speaking Danaka at home. It's sort of a mini language nest. Together with our daughter, I speak to and praise our daughter in my language, and my partner does the same in her language, Inupiaq. As we gain the skills and the knowledge, I hope that this will continue. And this was after moving home to my interior region. This is when I really took the leap from being an informal learning facilitator, someone with a little bit of knowledge to share, to a classroom teacher where you were really relied upon to take the lead and guide instruction. And I'm constantly trying to find ways to build upon these skills, and I think that in the long run I do want to find ways to reform policy, not just in Alaska but across the whole United States and the circumpolar north. I believe that as we become more organized and advocate for our rights, our linguistic human rights, our rights to practice our traditional cultures, our rights to live how we have and sustain ourselves using the lands and waters that we've been stewards of for so long, that there's inevitably going to be a shift. And when we're ready for that, or even perhaps ahead of that time, I want to put my efforts in creating a full immersion setting, whether that's in a school or a home. I've seen different resource and cultural centers across the world where it's not in a daytime school, it might be in an evening class or a weekend intensive, or oftentimes in my region during the summer there's culture camp where you learn through the culture and practice activities. And throughout all this, I'm seeking to really create a supportive network, both here locally but also in the literature. I want to be able to contribute something to the body of research that has been conducted so far and really grow as a scholar. Perhaps this will mean furthering my education in a doctoral program, or perhaps it will mean staying on this path I am now and deepening my relationship with my language and spending more time in an intentional learning setting with elder speakers. I'm in a master apprentice program now, informally, with the elder from Huslia, while we're living in the same town here in Fairbanks. And I really see potential with that to grow my conversational speaking ability